When Frank Sinatra sang That's Life, and I heard it as a young man, I thought, there's a ring of truth to that. You're, up in May and down in June? Or is it up in April and shot down in June? Yeah, or in May. I'll get the month straight. It was a long time ago when I heard that thing. At any rate, the point I want to make is that that's a pretty apt description of life. So what I'm going to do is use that as sort of my title this morning. And what I want to do is to describe life to you. And then I want to talk about how to handle life. Would that be interesting? That's life. That's life. That's what all the people say. When you're riding high in April and shot down in May, that's life. It's that May part I want to talk about. So if you have a Bible handy, turn with me to 1 Peter chapter 1. We're going to look at a number of verses today, but the first is 1 Peter chapter 1 verse 6. In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, if need be, that you have been grieved by various trials. I want to focus on a couple of words in this verse for a second. The word various means many-colored. Some trials come in a light pastel and others come in a dark black. We speak of Blue Monday and Black Tuesday. Trials come in all kinds of shapes and shades. It speaks of being grieved, which means that you're in pain or distress. As a matter of fact, that very word is used in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, where it talks about being grieved because of a loved one. At any rate, Peter opens his book by saying that we are grieved with various trials. Now flip the page to chapter 4 and look at verse 12, where he says, Beloved, do not think it strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you as though some strange thing happened to you. Again, he's talking about trials, only this time he calls them fiery trials, which here is nothing more than a figure of speech, meaning the fact that it was severe. And then he speaks about strange trials. Don't be surprised is the idea. Don't be astonished if some trial hits you. Matter of fact, the word strange appears twice in this verse in 1 Peter 4:12. And the second time it means something foreign. So don't think it's strange and that this is something foreign. That's life. That's just the way life is. And just because you're a Christian, you're not exempt. That's life for everybody. Now, let me talk about that for a second. I know two things that are going to happen tomorrow. For certain. I'm 100% certain two things are going to happen. The sun is going to rise in the east, and the sun is going to set in the west. Other than that, I'm not certain of anything. And that's what these verses are talking about. Let me use a word. Life is unsettled. It's unstable. You just never know what's going to happen next. Now, I have some plans for tomorrow. I get up early, I study, I eat breakfast, I go for a walk. I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow, which is my annual physical. Now, I don't know that any of that's going to happen. Who knows? Well, you say, well, the doctor will see you for sure. You ever had a doctor cancel his appointment? I have, sure. So you just don't know. You can't count on anything. Now, let me illustrate. Recently, and I mean within the last week or two, I reached for the remote on my TV. And I pushed the on button, and the TV didn't come on. So I pushed it again, and pushed it, and pushed it, and pushed it, and finally the TV came on. But then I had to hit the channel button. You have one of those remotes where you have to hit two buttons for the thing to come on? So I hit that button and hit that button and hit that button. And finally it came on. Now everything else worked except those two buttons. So I called the cable company and I said, look, could you send me two buttons? I got, everything else works, I just need two buttons. And they said, oh, we'll send you a new remote. They're free. I said, terrific. And how many years is it going to take to get here? And she said, well, you could go to the local store and they'd give you one. Oh, really? Deal. So I go scampering down the street and they gave me a new remote. Got it. With a long list of numbers in fine print. So I go home. I have to find my TV, find the number, put the number in, and it works, right? So I look at this list. My TV is not listed. So I call the cable company and I say, hey, thanks for the remote, but I don't have a number. Oh, well, we know, yeah, Roku's numbers aren't on the list. We'll give you the numbers. They gave me two numbers. Poked them in, didn't work. And they said, oh, your problem is you need a new remote. That remote didn't work. We'll send you another one. Great. How long is this going to take? They sent me another remote with another long list. So I go through that routine, and it doesn't work. So I called the cable company, and I said, look, I've got two remotes now. Neither one of them work. And they said, oh, we need to send you to the tech department. So they send me to the tech department. And the tech department says, do this. And I jumped through all their hoops, and they said, oh, you need another remote. And I said, how long is that going to take? And they said, oh, we'll ship it out. Okay, give me the new remote. So they sent me a new remote. I jumped through all those hoops again, called them and said, hey, this isn't working. They sent me to a third department. By the way, you know you can talk to people all over the world to get a problem solved? So I got to this third department, and they said, oh, you need a new remote. What? How long is that going to take? They sent me another remote. I got that remote and jumped through all their hoops, and it didn't work. Now, what's really funny about this is that three of these remotes are exactly alike. And none of them work, and the numbers don't work. So I called one more time. And I said, look, let me explain how many times I've called you, and I'm trying to be nice, you know? And they said, describe the remote. Is it black or silver? It's black. But I got two different kinds of black remotes. Oh, well, you need a new remote. So I get that one, and it doesn't have numbers. So I call them and say, hey. And this time I got a sweet little gal in Wisconsin. Spoke English. And she said, oh, you need to poke in these numbers. Boom, boom, boom. And it worked. Now, my point is, life doesn't work. And the people that are supposed to fix life don't work either. Life is just full of trouble. Amen, amen, and amen. Recently, I was out of town. Patricia had little Jacqueline with her, and they were going to come to church. And they were really looking forward to that because Patricia wanted to hear Joe preach, and Jacqueline and little Patricia are like this. They're on the phone with each other all the time, and they were so eager to see each other. And then Patricia, she was telling me the story, said, and we had matching outfits. So they go trucking down to the car, and there is a nail in the tire. So we call AAA, and AAA comes and fixes the tire, and they miss church. That's life. Life is a nail in the tire. It is unstable. You never know what's going to happen next. That's life. That's life. That's what all the people say. When you're riding high in April and shot down in May. It's unstable. There's more. Turn to the book of Ecclesiastes. If you don't know where that is, turn to the table of contents and start with the Psalms and keep going, and you'll bump into it. And turn to chapter 9. This is a verse you need to know. Ecclesiastes 9:11. Solomon says, I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the men of understanding, nor favor to men of skill. But time and chance happen to them all. What? The people that are best prepared don't succeed. The little expression, under the sun, simply means on the earth. And then he describes a group of people that you think would be successful. But the fastest runner does not always win the race. The strongest army does not always win the battle. The wisest do not always enjoy the best meals. The cleverest do not always make the money. And the most capable do not always get the job. Because time and chance are factors that play an important role in success or failure. When billionaire Paul Getty was asked to explain his success, he replied, some people find oil and some people don't. And you cannot predict which it's going to be. So you would think that the most prepared, the smartest, the strongest, the best would win, but they don't always win. It's amazing. On paper, the team that looks the strongest is sure to win the game, but that's not the way it works. As my brother says, who is a football fan, that's why you play the game. In 1998, the Minnesota Vikings scored an NFL record of 556 points during the season. It was the most points scored by any team in the 1990s. They won 15 out of 16 regular season games, and only the third team in NFL history to do that. They cruised to the NFL Central title and defeated the Arizona Cardinals in the division round, thus making it to the championship game. All that stood between the Vikings and the Super Bowl appearance was the startup Atlantic Falcons, who were 11 points underdog. With 2 minutes left, Gary Anderson, who had not missed any kicks all season, missed a 38-yarder that would have given the Vikings an insurmountable 10-point lead. The Falcons scored a game-tying touchdown and won in overtime. The Vikings thus became the first team to win at least 15 out of 16 games in the regular season and not win the Super Bowl. But then the Pittsburgh Steelers became the second in 2004, and the New England Patriots became the third in 2007. By the way, they had a 16-0 perfect record during the regular season. And in 2011, the Green Bay Packers became the fourth team to win the most games and lose the Super Bowl. The point is, life is unpredictable. It looks like the best is going to win, and they don't. It is simple as that. That's life. That's life. That's what all the people say. When you're riding high in April and shot down in May. One more. Turn to the book of James. In James chapter 2, he speaks of a poor man who comes into the assembly. And in verses 3 and 4, he says that the usher says to her, sit here at my footstool. Have you not, and then James says, have you not shown partiality among yourselves and become judges of evil thoughts? Now here's what's happening. I didn't read the whole passage, but what's happening is a rich man comes in and the ushers treats him with favoritism. Then the poor man comes in, and listen to what the usher says. Sit here under my footstool. What does that mean? He had a seat. He had a footstool. He could have had the fellow sit in his seat or sit on the footstool, but he doesn't do either. He says, sit at my footstool. And James says you're showing partiality. You've become judges of evil thoughts. That kind of partiality and prejudice is evil. It's unfair. And that's my point. That's life. Life is unstable, life is unpredictable, and life is unfair. He goes on to say, do not the rich oppress you and drag you into court? Do they not blaspheme that holy name by which you're called? So here are these people that are being partial and practicing prejudice, who are themselves oppressed by being hauled into court when they shouldn't have been. And they blaspheme the name of the Lord, all of which is unfair. In James chapter 5, verse 4, he says, indeed, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out, and cry to the reapers who have reached the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. So, now he's talking about being cheated out of money, their wages. And he says it was done by fraud. So in the book of James, he mentions a number of cases where you could say it was simply unfair. He speaks of partiality, prejudice, opposition, legal pressure, fraud, persecution, all of which is not fair. So, that's life. That's life. That's what all the people say. You're riding high in April and shot down in May. One of the stanzas of that song says, and as funny as it may seem, some people get their kicks stomping on a dream. That's what's unfair. But that's life. All right. I've mentioned three things. Life is unstable. You never know what's going to happen next. Life is unpredictable, even when you think you know what's going to happen because you're looking at the odds. Life is unpredictable. And life is unfair. Now, I have deliberately chosen some ordinary, even humorous things to illustrate this. But this can get very serious. Remember I started out saying that the word translated various means multicolored, many-colored. And that trials sometimes come in a light pastel. They're little irritations. Sometimes they can be major interruptions and really cause grief. I mean, you could just think about some of the things that have happened recently. Hurricane Ida comes through and literally wipes out the whole house. There's nothing left but the slab it was built on. Or up in Northern California, there are fires, and they destroy a whole small town. And in the Northeast, in New Jersey, the floods destroyed people's houses. And you look at that and you say, what did I do? What did I do? Nothing. Or people are getting fired for something they said when they were teenagers 30 years ago. Insane. Or you get laid off for no good reason. Or your business goes bankrupt because of COVID. Or somebody dies because of COVID. I'm telling you, That's life. Amen? It really is. All right. So here's the question. How do you handle the unstable irritations, the unpredictable interruptions, and the unfair intrusions of life? How do you handle life? Well, let me tell you what many people do. They get angry. That's what they do. They get angry. When something happens that you aren't expecting it to happen, then is when you get angry. Matter of fact, somebody shared with me many years ago a little chart that I've used with great profit in counseling many, many times. It all starts with an expectation. You have an expectation, and then that expectation gets frustrated. When the expectation gets frustrated, you get angry. So that anger, there may be other causes, but most often, anger is frustrated expectation. Write that down. Anger is frustrated expectation. I want to repeat it one more time because some of you just grabbed a pencil. Anger is frustrated expectation. Some people describe it by saying you have a goal and then the goal is frustrated. You don't get the goal. It's somehow interfered with, and then you get angry. And the illustration I've often used is, I'm going to go out to the parking lot, I'm going to put my key in the ignition, and I expect the car to start. If it doesn't, what happens? I get frustrated, and depending, and this is critical, depending on the situation, you could blow your cool. I mean, if you're Jay Leno and you got how many cars in the garage, no big deal, you just go get another car. But if you've been out of a job for 6 months and this is an interview and it's your last opportunity, if you spent all your savings and you get in the car and it doesn't start and that means you're going to miss the interview, you could lose it. So the degree of the anger really is related to the degree of the expectation. But write it down. Frustrated expectation is what causes anger. Now that little chart someone gave me years ago went on to say, and what's after anger? Suppose you don't deal with the anger. Then what happens? You get bitter. And if that hangs around, then what happens? According to this little chart I was given, the next step is a negative attitude. Do you know people with a negative attitude? People are raising their hand. Is that a confession or you know somebody? No, I said, do you know somebody? Yeah. Okay, good. I got you. Well, all of us do. You meet a person who's got a negative attitude, and I'll show you an angry person. They're angry. They're angry. I've known people, when I saw them coming, I thought within 5 minutes, something negative is going to come out of their mouth. And it usually doesn't take that long. Then what happens? If you let that negative attitude hang around, then the next step, according to this little chart I was given, is depression. Now, maybe there are other causes of depression. But I'll tell you one, you're an angry person and things didn't go your way and you don't like it just one little bit. So you get depressed. And in that little chart, the next was thoughts of suicide. And then attempts, and then who knows. Now what I'm suggesting is life is unstable, unpredictable, unfair. It's full of curveballs. You never know what's coming next. You can't predict what's coming next. And very often, because you were expecting something different, what you do is get angry. Make sense? Now, Paul says something about that in Ephesians 4:26. He says, be angry I mean, you might have the right to be angry, but be angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down on your wrath. Now let me explain to you what that means. If between now and sundown you get angry, you've got to deal with the anger before sundown. And I checked. Today, sundown in Los Angeles is 7:06. So if you're angry, you can be angry, according to Paul, until 7:06. By 7:07, you got to deal with it. And if you don't, what happens? Then you run the risk of harboring that anger and it becoming bitterness, becoming a negative attitude, depression, and affecting your relationships with other people. So, don't get angry. You say, well, it's easy for you to say. How do you do that? If I could tell you how to do that, would you be interested? You're supposed to say yes. All right, let me tell you how to do it. I'm going to give you 3 R's. You ready for this? Give you 3 R's. You practice these 3 R's, and you can not only handle anger, you can handle life. The life I just described. You ready? Number 1, reality. The first thing you need to do is face reality. I started by showing you a passage in 1 Peter 4:12. Do you remember what that verse said? Think it not strange. What is he saying? Don't be surprised. Don't be astonished. Don't be shocked because all these things happen. Just be prepared. That's life. That's the way life is. Job says, those who are born of women are few of days, and their life is full of trouble. That's just life. So accept the reality of life. I'm going to tell you, in counseling people, I think that people, not necessarily all, who are angry, anxious, and depressed are very often people who are not accepting reality. Just accept the reality. I once preached a sermon entitled The 5 Principles I Try to Live By. And the first was reality. And in that sermon I said, Jesus said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Now, the Greek word truth is aletheia. And you know what that word means? Truth. You know what that word means? Reality. Jesus is saying in instance, look, you got your head buried in the sand somewhere. If you know the truth, if you know reality, then you will be free and you'll not be tied up in all of the things that bind people. So the first thing you've got to do is look at reality. Matter of fact, used to be a talk show host on the radio named Laura Schlesinger, and she gave counseling on the phone, a lot of marriage counseling. People would call her up and describe the situation with their husband or their wife. And Laura would say, did they do this while you were dating? They say, yeah, but I thought he would change. See, now what's happening? They are not looking at reality. Did you know he drank before you got married? Then why did you marry him? Hello? Look at reality. I'm going to tell you, dating is one of the places where this is the toughest, because you start thinking emotionally, and you think about the wedding, and you think about marriage, and you think about this. And I'm telling you, love is blind. Marriage is an eye-opener. So go into this thing with your eyes open. Look at reality. Same thing for taking a job. Say, well, I knew there were going to be some hard things in this job. Did you consider that when you made the decision? Look at reality. And that means the passages we looked at. Life is unstable, life is unpredictable, and life is unfair. And the quicker you get that and the quicker you understand that, the happier you will be. That's the way to handle life. Well, I didn't expect that from her. Did you understand the doctrine of depravity? Well, I didn't think he would do that. Did you understand the doctrine of depravity? Nothing should surprise you. Did you read the Bible with one eye open? Just look at what the people in Scripture did. You should not be surprised. Or to use Peter's term, think it not strange. Don't be surprised when all of these unfair, unpredictable things happen to you. Just look at reality. Have I made that point? Number 2, promised you 3 R's. Here's the second one. And what you need to do next is determine your responsibility. Now, I used a passage in Ecclesiastes. Let me tell you what Solomon said was the conclusion. It's at the end of the book. In chapter 12, verses 13 and 14, Solomon says, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil." So Solomon gets down to the end of the book and he says, here's the conclusion of the whole matter. And let me tell you, the theme of this book is vanity of vanity, all is vanity, saith Solomon. All right? Vanity of vanity, all is vanity. Another way of saying that is unfair, unfair, all is unfair. It's all unpredictable. It's all unstable. That's life. What do? Fear the Lord. Now that's a very pregnant word. Has all kinds of nuances in it. It can mean to be afraid, to be terrified. It can also mean to stand in awe, to reverence, to honor. I think the way it's used in some passages, it includes things like trusting the Lord, obeying the Lord, doing what the Lord says. If you fear the Lord, that's what you're going to do, right? So, what you need to do is look at reality, as ugly as it is, and say to yourself, what is my biblical responsibility? What do I do in this situation? What is my responsibility? That's, by the way, that's the second R. Did you get that? What was the first one? Did you forget the first one already? Reality. What's the second one? Responsibility. Now, my wife has a way of explaining this. She says when something goes wrong, somebody says something, or something happens, she uses a mirror. And she says, in my head, I think, look in the mirror. And who do you see? You. And you say, what is your responsibility? What's my responsibility? I'm looking in the mirror. What's my responsibility? And she says, maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 95%. I got to figure out what percent of this is my responsibility. What in this did I do wrong? What can I learn from this? And then, this is why I like the mirror, she says, after I figure all that out, I turn the mirror around and say, I assume my responsibility, my 35%, the rest is yours. Not mine. Now, that's responsibility. You see, some people don't take enough responsibility. They blame shift. And some people take too much responsibility, they become enablers. And in between the two is, I know what my responsibility is and I do that. And when it comes to helping other people, Galatians chapter 6 says, bear one another's burdens. And then it says, let every man bear his own burdens. And it's in the same passage. So what are you talking about? Well, I've had it explained that bear your own burden was the normal load of a ship. And let every man bear his own burden is that. Let him bear his own burden. But when it says bear one another's burdens, it's using a word that says the ship is overloaded. Then you help. But the point I'm trying to make is you must trust the Lord to do your responsibility. Now, let me explain why you should do that. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul describes a situation that was beyond him. And here's what he says. Unless I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of revelation, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure concerning this thing. I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly will I rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities and reproaches and needs and persecutions and distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then it's when I'm strong. Did you hear what Paul said? He said, Lord, I've got this thorn in the flesh and it's hurt. Take it out. And the Lord said, no. But I tell you what I'll do. I'll give you my grace. And listen to Paul's response. He says, oh, if that's the case, I will boast in my infirmities that the, what did God promise him? Grace. But in what he says, Paul says that the power of Christ may rest upon me. So God promised him grace, and Paul says, I got it. That means I'll have the power to get through this. Amen. Now that's the responsibility. You trust the Lord for the grace, the power to make you Christ-like in this situation. So instead of getting angry, which leads to being hard-hearted, you will be gracious and tender-hearted. Anytime you are hard-hearted, beware, be careful. You're going in the wrong direction. Be kind, be tender-hearted, Paul says in Ephesians 4:31. But that is your responsibility. Now, I said I promised you 3 R's. Got one more. You ready? What was the first one? Reality. Oh, you got it. What's the second one? Responsibility. Oh, please listen to me. Listen. If you will just do what I'm telling you to do today, I'm out of a job. I mean, this is what it's all about. And my third R will explain that. My third R is results. You got to think about the results of what happens if you look at reality and assume responsibility. So let me talk about that. In James chapter 1 verse 2, he says, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the trying of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Whoa! James says in this passage, trust the Lord. And if you trust the Lord, the New King James, which I'm reading from, says you'll be patient. But the Greek word there should be endure. So he's saying, look, when the trial comes, hang in there. Be steadfast, to use his words. Endure. to use his words. And if you do, it will lead to, he uses the word perfection in this translation, maturity. That's how you get to be mature. So it is vitally important that you learn this lesson, because the result of learning it, if you do it properly, is you become a spiritual, mature, Christ-like believer in Jesus Christ. Or as I say when I preach on James, trials are for your training. So hang in there by trusting the Lord to give you the grace to hang in there and be Christ-like. Scott Peck, a psychiatrist, wrote a rather well-known book called The Road Less Traveled. At the time he wrote that book, he was not a believer. He became a believer later. But in that book he said, and I quote, "It is only because of problems that we grow mentally and spiritually." Oh, did you hear what I just said? It is only because of problems that we grow mentally and spiritually. When we desire to encourage the growth of the human spirit, we challenge and encourage the human capacity to solve problems. Just as in school, we deliberately set problems for our children to solve. It is through the pain of confronting and solving problems that we learn. Benjamin Franklin said, "Those things that hurt instruct." Scott goes on to say, "For it is for this reason that wise people can learn not to dread, but to actually welcome problems," which is what Paul did, and to actually welcome the pain of the problem, which is exactly what Paul did. So the point is, if you respond properly, it will lead to spiritual maturity. Then later in that passage, in verse 12 of James 1, James says, "Blessed is the man who endures temptation, for when he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who love him." So in the first part of that paragraph in James chapter 1, he says, look, if you trust the Lord, it'll lead to maturity. At the end of that paragraph, he says, and you'll get the crown of life. Now, by the way, that verse is translated, "Blessed are those who endure temptation." The word temptation is also the word that's translated trials, and it should be translated trials there. And I know that because you don't endure a temptation, you endure a trial. And furthermore, the one other place the crown of life is used, which is in the book of Revelation, and it's clearly saying, endure a trial, not a temptation. So the point is, if you trust the Lord, you will grow to maturity now, and you will be rewarded later. That is spiritual life. Paul says this very clearly in 1 Timothy 4:8. In that verse he says, "For bodily exercise profits a little, but godliness is profitable in all things, having promise for life that is now and that which is to come." Did you hear that? If you exercise yourself to godliness, then that is profitable for now and later. What's he saying? The same thing James is saying. It'll produce spiritual maturity in you now, and you will get rewarded for it later when you stand before the Lord and he says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." I wish I could zip open your brain and mine and pour this in. What I have said today is this: the way to handle the instability, unpredictability, and unfairness of life is to accept the reality that's life. Trust the Lord for grace to obey him, and if you do, you will be blessed in this life and rewarded in the next. I'd be satisfied if you'd walk out of here with 3 R's. Remember those 3 R's? Yes. We're going to put guards at the door. You're going to have to give those 3 to get out. Now, you know I'm kidding. But this is so critical. Another way to say some of this is that our disappointments are God's appointments. These are opportunities for God to show His grace. The things that we believe are tragedies are often blessings in disguise because we get to know God's grace. In those times, we get to know spiritual truth. We get to know the Lord. We get to know ourselves. So here's the deal. You need to walk out of here today expecting the unexpected. You need to walk out of here today knowing that the only thing you can predict besides the sunrise and sunset is that life is unpredictable. And then armed with these 3 tools, I'm going to face reality for all of its ugliness. But I'm going to trust the Lord to give me the grace not to do it my way and get angry, not to focus on it and think about it, not to talk about it all the time, but bury it and focus on the Lord. Become Christ-like with a tender heart that's gracious. Now, I said something a minute ago that'd be real easy to miss. So I want to end with it. If you do this, you get blessed. You grow to spiritual maturity, right? You get rewarded later, right? Well, I want to add a little twist. This is very important. If you do this, you learn. You learn spiritual truth. But let me tell you the spiritual truth that you learn. You learn about the Lord. This is what's so great about this. You get to know the Lord. And you learn a little about yourself. The great illustration is Job. He says, quote, "I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, and now my eye sees you." Before his suffering and his experience, when he lost everything, including the children and his wealth and the support of his friends, even the support of his wife, he said, you know, back in those days, I knew about you. But now that I've been through this, I see you. Now, he wasn't saying he saw God physically. He's saying, I have a fuller understanding of you now. That having gone through this, I have spiritual insight that I didn't have before. And then Job says this, "Therefore I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes." The Hebrew word abhor means I despise myself. Now keep in mind, this book starts with Job, the book saying he was perfect. And that Job didn't know why all this was happening to him, and he did not do anything to cause it. But when he saw the Lord, he saw himself. And that's what life is about. It's this relationship with the Lord. That when you respond to this, you get to know Him in a way that you would never get to know Him otherwise. And that's why I am so passionate about this. It's about knowing the Lord and knowing yourself. Same thing happened to Isaiah. In Isaiah 6, he said, I saw the Lord high and lifted up. And the next thing he says is, oh, I am a man of unclean lips. The second thing happened to Peter. The same thing happened to Peter. he said, well, we're not catching fish. There's no chance. And Jesus threw the net over the other side, and they caught 2 boatloads of fish. And Peter saw the Lord miraculously work, and he said, I am a sinner. Depart from me. That when you really, really are responding spiritually, what you see is the Lord and yourself. And that just may be the ultimate 2 components of spiritual growth. So having gone through suffering, Job had a better understanding of the Lord and of himself. That is spiritual life. Let's pray. Father, thank you. Thank you for the awesome privilege of getting to know you. We don't always appreciate the pain that's involved, but we cry with Paul that I may know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his suffering. Lord, give us that spirit. Give us that grace that we may know you at the deepest level. In Jesus' name, amen.